Welcome back to another episode about Dungeons Risk. It's been about 10 months since the last update, so I think we're a little overdue for this one. Remember when I told you I was putting this project on hold because I started work on a different project? Well, if you do remember that, then that's weird because I never told you guys that. On top of all that, after I made the last update, I realized...
Wait a minute! I hate
roguelikes.
And it all went down from there. But now I'm back, and let me tell you, this game is going in a new direction, and it's getting to a point where I'm actually going to like the final product. The first thing I did was throw on a subtitle just to get the ball rolling. And I present Dungeons Risk Firefight. Now, I should explain why I went with that, because honestly, you could put Firefight at the end of literally any game title. I went with that because I'm transitioning Dungeons Risk from just another roguelike to more of an endless wave defense type of game, like Halo Firefight. Side note, why are all these indie devs making roguelikes and Metroidvanias and stuff? Like, there's too many now. Now, for those of you who are loading your guns and sharpening your pitchforks already, let me clarify. I'm probably not going to completely scrap the roguelike parts, they're just not the main focus of the project anymore. But that doesn't mean I still can't work with them or add something related to a roguelike into this game in the future. Okay, so just like before, I need to go through my new plan again. What I've got right now is that the player will start in a large arena to fight against 5 waves of enemies that slowly increase in power. After those waves have been defeated, the player will move to another arena to fight another 5 waves, and this will continue until the player has defeated 15 waves of enemies in total. Which, after that, the player will get a hex put on them, which is essentially a debuff that will last until the player's accumulated 3 hexes or defeated 60 waves of enemies. Think of them like the skulls from Halo Firefight. After they defeated 60 waves of enemies, the player's hexes are cleared alongside the enemy's strength, but the enemy scaling becomes steeper and the game will get increasingly more difficult after each round. Alright, time to cut the yapping. I've got a lot more to talk about. The first thing I did after conceptualizing the new parts of this game was start making the new parts of the game. I started out with making the round controller, which will keep track of what wave, set, and round the player is on. I spent some time on that, and while I was working on it, I changed the way enemies scale as the waves go on, which is probably going to take some time to get properly balanced, but for now I think I found a decent scale. After the enemies, I focused a little bit more on the playable characters and made some changes to Knight to make her faster and deal more damage, which honestly didn't take long because I've always felt the Knight was fairly underpowered and already had a few ideas on how to boost her. Once I was finished with that, I decided the next course of action was to get the hexes going because it's going to be a new core part of the gameplay loop. So I set up an array to hold the hex names and a dictionary to hold the hex descriptions. So, when a hex is randomly picked, it takes the name from the array and sends it to the HUD with a signal, and puts it into a dictionary as a key and sends it a description to the HUD as well. And it's all displayed in a little animation. After the hex is chosen, it also goes into a match statement that adds a debuff to the player corresponding to the hex that was added. While I was working on adding the hex descriptions to the HUD, I did some small updates to it, like changing the color of the health bar so I didn't try to gouge my eyes out every time I looked at it. And while I was at it, I added a screen for when the round changes and found out that for some reason everything being displayed was off center by around 20 pixels. So I messed with some settings and somehow it gets fixed if the game is in full screen and it's set to not change the window size. But honestly, I still have no idea why this bug is happening or how to fix it. Also, I'm just going to skip the part where I added movement and pathfinding to the archer enemies so they're not just stationary because that was one of the most boring couple of days that I've spent working on this project. But that's a thing now. The archers will follow the player and shoot whenever the player is in sight. After that CIA torture technique they call programming, I was bored, so I made a big ass arrow that points towards the exit because I felt a big arrow was appropriate. While I was at it, I also tried to make a mini-map, but before it was even finished, I didn't really like how it was looking and didn't really know how it was going to begin to fit on mobile displays, so I scrapped it. I might bring it back out again, see if I can make it work, but for now it's being canned. I never like removing or scrapping features, so whenever I do, I always make sure to make something else better at the very least, and the enemy attacks themselves needed a serious juice up. which in this case means more particles. I made the enemy mage attacks spawn particles when they get spawned, I made the enemy arrows finally produce particles when they're moving, and now when they hit a target they make particles too. I also added that to the player arrows while I was at it. After that, it was time to start a new big feature, which was a shop and inventory system for buying and storing items that you can use while playing. You might be saying, hey, wait a minute, you already made a shop in like episode 3. And I'm saying we need a new one. Now, if you've seen my other video about UI design, you'll know that I am not good at it, and I decided I was going to make the new shop on the main menu. I'd like to say I've gotten a little bit better at making UIs after finally figuring out control nodes, and after some time messing around I made this, which I thought was good enough, so I got to work on making the inventory. The inventory is just a menu put onto the HUD that when you buy something it sends a signal to the inventory telling you to add an inventory item, which is just a button with a picture on it that says what it is. The item is put onto the menu in a grid formation waiting to be pressed, and when the item is pressed, it is removed from the inventory, and the player gets whatever buff the potion was designed to give. After some tweaking, I got it all working fairly well in a way that I really liked. Finally, to wrap things up so that I could make a beta and start sending it to some friends to test, I need to make some actual maps that would work with the new gameplay loop. Originally, the rooms could have been smaller because you were only going to be in them for a short amount of time, but now you'll be in the room for longer, which means they gotta be bigger and better. So I got to work on making the new rooms, and by new I mean only one is completely new and the other 3 are revamped old maps. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy my process of making the rooms sped up. Go to the time on screen to skip this if you hate watching the good part of videos. that about wraps this video up. Of course, this skips over some smaller things like optimizations and bug fixes because this was made as literally my first project, and now I'm coming back to it and it hurts my eyes. Now, if you oppose the new direction that I'm taking this game in, or if you have your own suggestions on what I can add, or just a new name because this one kind of sucks, be sure to let me know. I prefer some form of feedback over that. Other than all that, that's all I have for now. I'm out of here. Quick side note, I'm writing this like 2 weeks after the rest of the script was written, and I have since added even more to this game, like mobile controls, enemy ranks, saving, stuff like that. But I'll probably go more into depth on those later because I forgot to record the footage for all the new stuff. Alright, I'm actually out of here now.